Most men don't realize the exact moment they become invisible. It doesn't happen when they age. It happens when the world stops responding to them the way it used to, and they quietly start blaming everything except themselves. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some older men walk into a room and immediately command attention without saying a word. Others talk endlessly and are still ignored. Same age, same experience, very different presence, and no one ever explains why. What separates these two men is not money, looks, status, or confidence tricks. It's something far more unsettling, because once you see it, you can't hide from it anymore. Most men are taught to chase respect. Very few are taught how respect actually works. And that misunderstanding costs men their magnetism, their authority, and eventually their relevance. You've probably felt it before. People listening politely, but not really hearing you. Younger men brushing past your advice. Conversations where your words land flat, even though you know you're right. That's not coincidence. That's feedback. This video is not here to motivate you. It's here to expose the silent habits that make men forgettable and the rare internal shifts that make others lean in without you asking. By the end of this, you'll understand why some men grow calmer, sharper, and more respected with age, while others grow louder, bitter, and increasingly ignored. And more importantly, you'll know exactly which path you're on and how to change it before it's too late. Stay with this until the end, because once you understand what truly creates masculine gravity, you won't need to chase respect ever again. It will start finding you. Most men believe that time is doing work on their behalf. They think years alone are polishing them, upgrading them, giving them gravity. And that belief is precisely why so many older men fade into the background without ever understanding when it happened. Age, by itself, does not refine a man. Age simply reveals him. Whatever was unresolved, unexamined, or avoided earlier in life does not disappear with time. It hardens, it calcifies, it becomes personality. This is where the real separation begins. The forgettable man confuses experience with wisdom. He assumes that because he has lived longer, he must automatically know more, deserve more, and command more. But lived experience without reflection is just repetition. You can repeat the same emotional patterns, the same mistakes, the same fears for decades and still call it experience. That doesn't make you deep, it makes you predictable. The magnetic man understands something most men resist. Inner evolution is not automatic. It is intentional, uncomfortable, and ongoing. He does not outsource his growth to time. He takes responsibility for it. He examines himself. He questions his reactions. He challenges his own narratives. And that internal work quietly changes the way he moves through the world. Psychologically, people respond less to what you say and more to what you embody. You can feel when someone has depth because they are not trying to prove it. The forgettable older man is often stuck performing maturity instead of living it. He speaks with certainty but lacks curiosity. He gives advice without understanding context. He mistakes rigidity for strength. And underneath it all, there is often a subtle fear, the fear that if he stops asserting who he is, he will disappear. Magnetic men don't carry that fear, not because they are fearless, but because they have confronted it. They've sat with their insecurity instead of covering it with control. They've accepted that growth does not end at a certain age, and that humility is not weakness, it's intelligence. Philosophically, evolution is the difference between aging and becoming. Aging is passive, becoming is active. Becoming requires you to outgrow earlier versions of yourself, even when those versions once protected you. That's difficult for many men because identity can become a prison. If you've spent years defining yourself as the provider, the strong one, or the man who knows, letting go of those fixed identities can feel like loss. But the magnetic man is willing to lose outdated identities in order to gain coherence. And coherence is magnetic. Younger people especially are acutely sensitive to internal alignment. They can sense when a man's words and inner world are disconnected. That's why age alone never impresses them. What impresses them is clarity. A man who knows who he is, where he is going, and what he stands for without needing external reinforcement. That clarity does not come from years. It comes from self-examination. The forgettable man often resists this because introspection threatens his self-image. It forces him to confront uncomfortable truths, that some of his confidence is compensation, that some of his opinions are defenses, that some of his authority is borrowed from the past. So instead of evolving, he doubles down, he becomes more opinionated, more dismissive, more closed, and in doing so, he slowly loses relevance, not socially, but energetically. Magnetic men do the opposite. They stay porous. They listen, not to be agreeable, but to stay sharp. They allow new information to refine them instead of threatening them. This makes them adaptable without being unstable, firm without being rigid. That balance is rare, and rarity creates value. There is also a deep psychological shift that happens when a man stops relying on age as a credential. He stops needing to be right. He becomes more interested in being accurate. He stops seeking dominance and starts cultivating impact. This shift changes everything about how he speaks, how he listens, how he enters a room. His presence becomes grounded rather than performative. Think about it this way: insecurity ages badly. Unresolved fear ages badly. Untested beliefs age badly. But self-awareness ages well. Discipline ages well. Emotional regulation ages exceptionally well. These are the traits that compound over time, but only if they are practiced. The forgettable man waits for respect. The magnetic man builds himself into someone who doesn't need to wait. He understands that respect is not requested, it is a response, and responses are earned through consistency, not declarations. There is also a philosophical maturity here that often goes unnoticed. Magnetic men accept impermanence. They don't cling to relevance, youth, or status. They understand that everything external is temporary, so they invest internally. They develop character, discernment, and restraint. These qualities are not loud, but they are felt. And being felt is far more powerful than being seen. This is why magnetic men don't chase validation from younger generations. They don't compete with them, resent them, or try to impress them. They are not threatened by youth because their identity is not built on comparison. It is built on coherence. They are rooted in who they are becoming, not who they used to be. And this is where the deepest separation lies. Forgettable men outsource their worth to time, status, or recognition. Magnetic men internalize it. They become the source rather than the seeker. That internal source shows up as calm under pressure, as curiosity instead of defensiveness, as presence instead of performance. These are not accidental traits. They are cultivated, and cultivation requires effort long after society tells men they should be done. If there is one illusion that quietly destroys men as they age, it is the idea that growth has an expiration date. That illusion produces stagnation, and stagnation, no matter how polished, is never attractive. The man who continues evolving internally never becomes invisible because he never stops becoming interesting to himself first. And when a man is deeply engaged in his own evolution, the world pays attention without being asked. So reflect on this honestly. Are you letting time define you, or are you defining yourself through time? Because age will reveal you regardless. The question is whether it will reveal a man who stopped growing, or a man who chose to keep becoming. There is a subtle desperation that lives beneath the surface of many men, and most of them don't even know it's there. It doesn't always show up as neediness or pleading. Sometimes it looks like talking too much. Sometimes it looks like joking excessively. Sometimes it looks like asserting opinions where none are required. But at its core, desperation is always the same thing: a hunger to be seen, validated, and confirmed by others. And nothing repels faster than that hunger. The forgettable man doesn't realize that the moment he enters a room wanting something from it, the room feels it. He wants approval. He wants admiration. He wants respect without first offering depth. So his energy reaches outward instead of settling inward. Psychologically, people are extremely sensitive to this. They may not articulate it, but they sense imbalance. And imbalance makes people uncomfortable. The magnetic man operates from a completely different internal position. He does not arrive needing anything. Not because he is indifferent, but because he is complete. His sense of self is not up for negotiation in every interaction. This creates grounded presence. And grounded presence is rare because it requires inner stability, not external performance. Presence is not about posture or eye contact alone. It's about emotional regulation. It's about being able to sit in silence without rushing to fill it. It's about allowing moments to breathe instead of forcing momentum. The forgettable man experiences silence as threat. He interprets it as disinterest or rejection, so he rushes to fill it with noise. The magnetic man experiences silence as space, and space gives others room to lean in. Psychologically, this is powerful. When you are not trying to impress, you allow others to project curiosity onto you. When you are not chasing approval, people start offering it. This is not manipulation. It is the natural result of emotional self-sufficiency. People are drawn to those who are not trying to extract something from them. The desperate man often confuses intensity with depth. He speaks forcefully, interrupts often, and dominates conversations. He believes that presence must be asserted. But what he doesn't realize is that dominance without grounding feels unstable, and instability signals insecurity. The more he tries to control the interaction, the less people trust him. The magnetic man understands restraint. He understands that influence grows in proportion to how little you need it. He listens fully, not performatively, not while waiting to speak, but genuinely. This makes others feel seen, which paradoxically increases his authority, because the man who does not compete for attention becomes the one people remember. There is also an important philosophical distinction here between attention and gravitas. Attention is loud and temporary. Gravitas is quiet and enduring. Forgettable men chase attention. Magnetic men cultivate gravitas. Gravitas comes from inner alignment, from knowing your values and not negotiating them for social comfort, from responding rather than reacting. Reaction is the language of desperation. When a man reacts emotionally to being challenged, ignored, or disrespected, he reveals that his sense of worth is externally held. The magnetic man pauses. That pause is not weakness. It is sovereignty. It communicates that he is not hijacked by the moment, that he chooses his responses rather than being controlled by his impulses. This emotional regulation creates safety. And safety is one of the most underestimated forms of magnetism. People relax around those who are emotionally steady. They trust them. They open up. They listen. The forgettable man often thinks charisma is about excitement. In reality, it's about stability. Another crucial difference lies in intention. The desperate man enters interactions asking, often unconsciously, "What can I get here?" The magnetic man asks, "How can I be fully present here?" One is transactional. The other is relational. Humans instinctively recoil from transactions disguised as connection, but they lean toward authentic presence because it feels rare and respectful. This is especially noticeable across generations. Younger people are not impressed by men who try to be relevant. They are impressed by men who are rooted. When an older man tries too hard to appear interesting, modern, or dominant, it signals insecurity. When he remains calm, curious, and self-possessed, it signals confidence without effort. The magnetic man does not fear being overlooked. That fear belongs to men who define themselves through attention. When you are comfortable not being the center, paradoxically, you often become it, not through force, but through gravity. Gravity is created by mass, and psychological mass comes from inner work. That inner work includes confronting the discomfort of not being chosen, not being applauded, not being immediately validated. The forgettable man avoids that discomfort by performing. The magnetic man accepts it and moves through it. In doing so, he becomes free. And freedom is deeply attractive. There is also a profound maturity in understanding that you do not need to explain yourself to everyone. Over-explaining is often a sign of insecurity. It reveals a need to be understood at all costs. The magnetic man speaks clearly, then allows space. He does not chase agreement. He trusts that the right people will understand without persuasion. This trust changes the energy of his communication. His words slow down, his tone steadies, his presence expands, and people feel it before they intellectually register it. Desperation is noisy. Grounded presence is quiet. One demands attention, the other invites it, one exhausts the room, the other anchors it, and this is the separation that changes everything. When a man stops needing to be seen, he starts being felt. When he stops seeking validation, he starts commanding respect, not because he wants it, but because his internal balance makes others adjust around him. So reflect on this honestly. Where in your life are you performing instead of being present? Where are you speaking to be noticed instead of listening to understand? Because the moment you withdraw your need for approval, you gain something far more powerful: gravity. And gravity does not ask people to come closer, it simply gives them a reason to. One of the most subtle ways a man becomes invisible is by living too comfortably in who he used to be. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, almost politely. He begins to reference the past more than the present. He tells the same stories. He leans on former titles, former successes, former relevance. And without realizing it, his identity stops moving forward. It settles. And when identity settles, presence weakens. The forgettable man believes the past is proof of worth. He assumes that what he achieved once should continue to speak for him now. But psychologically, the past only creates interest when it connects to momentum. Without momentum, it sounds like nostalgia, and nostalgia, when it replaces growth, quietly signals stagnation. The magnetic man understands this instinctively. He respects his past, but he does not live in it. He carries his experiences lightly. He doesn't introduce himself through what he used to do. He introduces himself through how he thinks, how he sees the world now, how he is still shaping his life. That orientation toward the future keeps his energy alive. Human beings are drawn to movement, not frantic movement, but intentional direction. When a man speaks with curiosity about what he is learning, refining, or building, people feel that he is still engaged with life. Engagement is attractive because it signals vitality. The opposite, fixation on the past, signals withdrawal. There is also a deeper psychological reason why living in the past makes a man forgettable. When someone defines themselves through previous achievements, they often become defensive about them. Any challenge to their relevance feels like an attack on their identity. This creates rigidity, and rigidity suffocates connection. Magnetic men remain flexible because their sense of self is not frozen in a former version of success. They are willing to be beginners again. That willingness is not weakness, it is confidence. It takes a strong sense of self to say, I don't know yet, but I'm learning. People trust men who are honest about growth more than men who pretend to have arrived. This is especially important as the world changes. The forgettable man experiences change as erosion. New ideas threaten his status. New generations feel like competition. New norms feel like loss. So he resists, he dismisses, he criticizes, and in doing so, he isolates himself emotionally. The magnetic man experiences change as information. He does not need to agree with everything, but he listens. He observes patterns. He updates his understanding. He doesn't chase youth, but he respects evolution. This allows him to stay relevant without trying to be trendy. There is a philosophical maturity in knowing that relevance is not about keeping up, it's about staying aligned. When a man is aligned with his values and continues to refine his thinking, he naturally intersects with the present moment. He doesn't need to force relevance because relevance is a byproduct of engagement. Living in the past also affects how a man communicates. The forgettable man often speaks from conclusion. He has already decided how things are. His mind is closed even if his mouth is open. Conversations with him feel like lectures or corrections. Over time, people stop leaning in. The magnetic man speaks from inquiry. Even when he has strong opinions, he remains open to refinement. His conversations feel alive because they are not performances of certainty. They are exchanges of perspective. This intellectual humility makes others feel respected rather than instructed. Another critical difference lies in how these men relate to younger people. The forgettable man either competes with them or patronizes them. Both positions come from insecurity. Competing says, "I'm afraid of being replaced." Patronizing says, "I need to stay superior." Neither creates respect. The magnetic man does neither. He doesn't need to prove dominance or wisdom. He allows younger people to be young. He doesn't imitate their culture or reject it outright. He observes, understands, and maintains his own rhythm. This independence from comparison is deeply grounding. A man who lives in the future is not obsessed with legacy in the ego-driven sense. He is not trying to be remembered. He is trying to be engaged. He invests in skills, relationships, and ideas that stretch him. That stretching keeps him psychologically alive. And psychological aliveness is what people feel when they say someone has presence. The past can inform you, but it cannot sustain you. Identity that relies on memory alone becomes brittle. The moment the world stops reinforcing it, it collapses. The magnetic man avoids this trap by anchoring his identity in process rather than outcome. He is defined by how he moves, not what he once achieved. There is also a quiet confidence in a man who is building something that is not yet visible. He doesn't announce it. He doesn't use it for validation, but it gives his words weight. People sense when someone has internal direction. Direction creates credibility long before results appear. The forgettable man waits for recognition before he moves. The magnetic man moves because movement is who he is. He does not outsource motivation to applause. He generates it internally. And this is where living in the present, future axis becomes transformative. When a man's focus is on what he is refining now, he becomes less reactive. He doesn't need to defend his past because he is invested in his trajectory. That investment creates calm. Calm creates authority. So if you find yourself often saying, "Back in my day," pause. Not because the past is irrelevant, but because it should be context, not identity. Ask yourself what you are curious about now, what you are learning now, what you are building now, because those answers determine whether your presence feels alive or archived. The men who remain magnetic are not those with the most impressive pasts. They are the ones with the most intentional futures. And when a man shifts his focus from who he was to who he is becoming, he doesn't just stay relevant, he becomes impossible to ignore. There comes a moment in every man's life when reality stops negotiating, when life delivers disappointment, loss, rejection, or irrelevance, and no amount of charm, status, or intellect can talk its way out of it. That moment is the crossroads. Some men harden there, others deepen. And that single choice determines whether age turns into bitterness or authority. The forgettable man meets hardship with blame, not always loudly, not always obviously, but consistently. He blames circumstances, systems, other people, timing, the younger generation, the culture. Blame becomes his psychological shield. It protects his ego from discomfort, but it also freezes his growth. Because the moment you blame, you surrender agency. And a man without agency never develops authority. The magnetic man does something far more difficult. He takes responsibility without self-punishment. He asks, "What is mine to own here?" That question alone changes his posture in life. Responsibility is not about fault, it is about power. When you take responsibility, you regain influence over your inner world. And influence over your inner world is the foundation of emotional mastery. Emotionally immature men believe authority comes from control over others. Emotionally mature men understand that authority begins with control over self. This is where accountability transforms aging into something rare and compelling. The man who has learned to regulate his emotions does not need to dominate conversations, impose opinions, or react defensively. His steadiness does the work for him. Psychologically, humans instinctively trust consistency. A man who responds rather than reacts communicates safety. Safety is not weakness. Safety is leadership. When people know they won't be emotionally punished for disagreement, they relax. When they relax, they listen. When they listen, authority emerges naturally. The forgettable man resists this because accountability threatens his self-image. If he admits responsibility, he fears it will confirm inadequacy. So instead, he externalizes discomfort. He becomes cynical, sarcastic, dismissive. Over time, this emotional posture calcifies into bitterness. And bitterness is loud, heavy, and deeply unattractive. The magnetic man understands that bitterness is simply unprocessed grief. Grief for missed opportunities, for unrealized potential, for versions of life that didn't happen. Instead of denying that grief, he processes it. He integrates it. He allows disappointment to refine him rather than define him. This integration creates depth. Depth is not intelligence alone, it is emotional range. It is the capacity to sit with discomfort without collapsing or lashing out. Men who develop this capacity become grounding forces in any environment. Their presence lowers tension. Their words carry weight, not because they demand attention, but because people feel steadier around them. This is why accountability matures into authority. Authority is not given by position or age. It is granted by trust. And trust is built when a man demonstrates that he can handle himself under pressure. Not perfectly, but consciously. The forgettable man is ruled by his triggers. Disrespect destabilizes him. Disagreement provokes him. Change irritates him. Each emotional reaction chips away at his credibility. People may tolerate him, but they do not rely on him. And reliance is the true marker of authority. The magnetic man is not trigger-free. He is trigger-aware. That awareness creates choice. Choice creates composure. Composure creates respect. This chain reaction is subtle but powerful. Over time, people begin to defer to him, not out of fear, but out of confidence in his judgment. There is also a philosophical shift that occurs when a man embraces accountability. He stops seeing life as something happening to him and starts seeing it as something happening through him. This reframing changes everything. He becomes less reactive, less resentful, less entitled. He replaces complaint with curiosity, and curiosity keeps him mentally alive. Accountability also reshapes how a man relates to failure. The forgettable man hides from it or explains it away. The magnetic man studies it. He extracts patterns, he adjusts. This process builds wisdom that is embodied, not theoretical. And embodied wisdom is immediately felt by others. You can hear it in how he speaks. There is less certainty, but more clarity. Less rigidity, but more precision. He doesn't speak to impress. He speaks to illuminate. People trust men who are not trying to win conversations. Another crucial difference is how these men handle power. The forgettable man uses power to protect his ego. The magnetic man uses power to protect the space. He knows when to speak and when to stay silent, when to assert and when to allow. This discernment is what separates dominance from leadership. Accountability also requires a man to confront his own shadow, his envy, his resentment, his need for validation. Many men age without ever doing this work. They become defensive versions of themselves. The magnetic man turns inward and asks hard questions. Not to shame himself, but to free himself. Freedom is what people sense around him. Emotional freedom. Freedom from needing approval. Freedom from constant self-justification. This freedom makes him lighter, even as he becomes more serious. And seriousness without heaviness is rare. There is a quiet authority in a man who can say, "I was wrong," without collapsing. In a man who can apologize without losing dignity. In a man who can change his mind without feeling diminished. These are not small traits. They signal inner strength. The forgettable man fears accountability because he equates it with weakness. The magnetic man embraces it because he understands that avoiding responsibility is the weakest position of all. Responsibility is where agency lives. Agency is where power lives. As men age, life strips away illusions. Physical advantages fade, social leverage shifts. External validation becomes inconsistent. What remains is character, and character is built through repeated moments of accountability. This is why some men grow calmer with age while others grow angrier. Calm comes from acceptance paired with responsibility. Anger comes from resistance paired with blame. One creates authority, the other creates isolation. So if you want to know whether you are becoming forgettable or magnetic, ask yourself this honestly. When life challenges you, do you look outward or inward? Do you explain or do you examine? Because every moment of accountability strengthens your inner spine. And a man with a strong inner spine never needs to demand respect. He simply carries it,